Hi, I'm Jameson Mitchell, and I'd like to welcome you to this week's Oracle Outlook. In this video, I'll be doing a tarot card reading for the week starting May the 16th, 2016, so stay tuned. And here we are with the cards on the table, and the deck assisting me for this week's reading is the Universal Waite Tarot by A.E. Waite and Pamela Colman Smith. And so, taking the deck in hand, going to shuffle the cards, and as I do with each of these general weekly readings, I'm going to shuffle the cards with the intention of asking Spirit what we might need to know for the week ahead. What information is going to help us move through any potential challenging experience we could face so that we can have the best week possible. So now I'm going to cut the deck. Now I'm going to draw the top three cards. The first card is going to represent what we might experience for the beginning of the week. Next card is going to represent what we might experience for the middle of the week. And then the final card will round out the week. So these are the cards, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn over the deck, and the card at the bottom of the deck is going to inform us as to what the foundational energy or the basis for the week could be. And the card is the Lover's card. So the first thing about the Lovers is that it is a major arcana card, and major arcana cards, when they show up in a reading, usually carry more weight. For me, they represent a spiritual or psychological issue or influence, something that is being designed for our growth and evolution and development. It can be an important issue or event. So the Lover's card traditionally is known as the choice. So the energy of the Lover's card could be that those of us watching this video are perhaps being at a crossroads in life and needing to make a major life choice. That's the traditional meaning of the card. Now, naturally being called the Lover's card, it can also be about relationships. So it can be about intimate relationships or just relationships generally speaking. So there could be a choice or a decision, being at a crossroads pertaining to a particular relationship, or making choices about how we're going to relate to people this week, because another aspect of the Lover's card is that it is the sign of Gemini. And Gemini, for me, is a sign that's attributed to communication. So there may be choices or decisions that we need to make in terms of how we're going to communicate to people this week. And the other thing about this is, and I think this is still in effect, is that the ruling planet of Gemini is Mercury, and as we all know, Mercury is in retrograde. I believe it's still in retrograde, and so there could be communication issues that are tied to Mercury being in retrograde. So that's another component that we might need to keep in mind. Usually when we're faced with a choice and the Lover's card comes up, it's asking us a couple of things. Number one, for me, it usually represents taking into account how you feel about the choice or the decision. Now, there's a woman on the card, and so a woman on the card typically can represent your emotions, your feelings. It represents feminine energy. And then the man on the card represents masculine energy. So it could be about your thoughts, the way you think, your mental processing, things of that nature. So the Lover's card can symbolically represent the union or the merger of your masculine energy, the way you think, and then your feminine energy and the way you feel. So it could be that in the decision-making process, it could be that we may be challenged with how we think about the situation versus how we feel about it, or that we need to kind of link our mind and our heart, our head and our heart. So there could be a couple of things too, like, you know, if you're faced with a choice or decision, you may be thinking about it one way and feeling about it another way. So I'm seeing that kind of energy. The other thing with the Lover's card is that it may be asking us to take a more spiritual perspective on things, because the woman on the card is looking at the angel, and so the angel represents your spiritual side, your spiritual self, your spiritual aspect. If you go with the idea that your mind, your heart, and then this would be your spirit kind of energy. So it's like, it could be like there's more of a leaning, or you're being prompted to go with your spirit in terms of making the decision. Usually with our feelings are usually connected to our spiritual nature. You know, if you go with the idea like your heart space, your intuition, that's all female energy. And so that's direct. There's a direct connection to spirit when you're going with the idea of trusting your feelings and relying on your intuition versus your head. Then it's very interesting, because then the man looks to the woman. So it's like you get an intuitive hit, or you get an intuitive feeling, and then your thoughts kind of process or analyze that intuitive information. So I'm seeing that whole kind of energy. So it could be part of the what could be helpful in making a decision is first asking yourself, how do you feel about that? You know, are you experiencing a certain type of feeling, certain kind of energy, that, and then how do you process that, and using all of that to help you with the decision making process. So I'm seeing that. The last thing with the angel on the card, it could be those of you who work with angelic energy. This is Archangel Raphael, so we could call upon Archangel Raphael to assist us in healing an emotional relationship, an emotional connection, that kind of energy. So I'm seeing that. And then the last thing with the Lover's card is a law of attraction card. If you go with the idea here that the Lover's card can mean attraction, being a spiritual card, it can represent universal laws or principles, then this would be the law of attraction. And so understanding that the law of attraction basically says that you are attracting, it's the idea of like attracting like. So everything that comes into your sphere, everything that comes into your world is a reflection of your thinking about it and your feeling about it. So it's saying that if you're not enjoying what it is that you're bringing into your life, what you're attracting, then you may want to take a look at what you think about it, what you feel about it, and then if you need to make different choices. Because here's the thing, if you're wanting a different result, you may have to do some examination about your choices and your decisions, and then choose differently, choose again. So I'm seeing that kind of energy with the Lover's card. And so now we're going to move on to the cards that are here on the table for the remainder of the reading. And now turning our attention to the card for the beginning of the week, we have the Ten of Wands. Okay, so now when the Ten of Wands comes up, it could suggest that there is a lot going on. If you look at the gentleman on the card, he is carrying 10 wands, and it looks like he is burdened by that. So it could be, are you in a situation this week that you are shouldering the load, you are taking on a lot of responsibility? It could be with that, you may be carrying the burden or the weight in a relationship, going back to the Lover's card, where it could be about choices, decisions, and relationships. It could be like somebody in the relationship is seemingly carrying the load, taking on all the responsibility, doing all the work, because wands represents work, business, enterprise, things of that nature. So it could be you are feeling burdened by the fact that you are doing all the work in the relationship. Sometimes when this card comes up, it is a warning that we are taking on too much, and that we may be on the fast road to fatigue, exhaustion, and burning ourselves out. Usually when the Ten of Wands comes up, the lesson with this is that we are being asked to learn the art of delegation, which means that we have to let go of the choice to take on everything, the choice that we have to do all the work ourselves. I have a personal experience with this card. So for me, when this card comes up, it can sometimes represent the idea of needing to do everything yourself because on some level you are unwilling to relinquish control because you believe that if you allow other people to take on some of the responsibility, either one or two things: either they're not going to do it right or it's not going to get done at all. And so that just reinforces the idea that you have to do it all yourself. And there may be underneath that, as I'm saying, that there may be an undercurrent of not being able to rely and depend on other people. So the lesson with this card is that you are being charged with learning the lesson of delegation. You have to be willing to let people take on responsibility. You have to be willing to let people do the work. It may not be done the way you would do it, and that makes sense because everyone else is not you. So only you can do it the way you would do it. So you have to let go of the idea that people are not going to do it the way you would do it because they're not. And you have to be willing to be okay with that. The other thing here is that sometimes when we take on all the responsibility, we kind of enable people not to ever be responsible. We think that sometimes taking on all responsibility is helpful in a relationship, and sometimes it can be detrimental because the person never learns responsibility. They never learn to do their part, to do their fair share, to do the work. And then we just think that if we just continue on the way we're going, that at some point they're going to change, but they're never going to change if you continue to do everything. So this card is about taking a look at all the responsibilities that you are shouldering, that you are carrying around, and taking a look at that and asking yourself, do I need to be doing all that I'm doing? Are there people around me who could be helping me, supporting me, doing what it is that they can do? As I'm saying that, I'm pausing because it could be that you are keeping people from doing work that they really are capable of doing, because I'm seeing the expression in my head about relying on people's strengths. So it could be like giving people what it is that they are capable of doing that is in alignment with what their strengths are. Not looking at it from what they may be lacking or what they're not proficient at, but what their strengths are, and giving them that work. And then being willing to let go. Your job in that is to be willing to let go of the need for control. So I'm seeing that. The other thing here could be, since I said that wands are about work and enterprise, it could be that one of the choices could be is that somebody may be moving into a space of making a transition with work, and with that it's going to come with a lot of responsibility, new job duties, things of that nature. Their workload is going to become heavier, for lack of a better way of putting it, heavier, and then they have to learn how to delegate all the work because they're going to be in a position where they can't just simply do everything on their own. So I'm seeing that. And then the last thing, since I touched on Archangel Raphael, and Archangel Raphael is the healing angel, simply I'm looking at the image. Another thing that we could be mindful of is that be mindful of heavy lifting, because I'm seeing the potential here is that somebody who could be doing some heavy lifting could actually throw their back out. So just be careful of that. And this here, if that's the case, then like somebody has back issues or, you know, a bad back, then you're being asked to kind of learn to work with your limitations and not go beyond them. So I'm seeing that. So again, this could be the idea of just generally speaking in relationships, taking on too much and doing all the work in the relationship to make it work because you believe like that's the only way it's going to work is if you do all the work, and be willing to let that go. If you are moving into a sphere with a change in work, then it would be you learning the art of delegation because your workload is going to become is going to increase and you can't do all the work on your own. So you have to learn delegation or else you're going to burn yourself out. And then finally, be mindful of heavy lifting. Okay, moving to the middle of the week, we have the King of Wands. Okay, so there is a lot of work-related type of energy because we have 2 wands back to back. The King of Wands is an approach card. So again, it fits with what I said about the idea of somebody making a change or a transition in work, because the king is a person who's in a position of authority, because kings in tarot represent power, control, leadership, authority, things of that nature. So I'm seeing that. So somebody could be stepping more into that. Another thing that could happen with the King of Wands, the King of Wands is an entrepreneurial card. So it could be somebody is actually moving into the sphere of doing their own thing, having their own business. And so the King of Wands is a good indication of that. This card, when it shows up in that light, is asking you to go with what it is that you are passionate about. Now, he is directly looking at this. So another thing here, again, is repeating that message of, if you are an entrepreneur, and I'm getting the idea here that you may be like a one-man show, then this card in that regard is asking you to consider the idea of your workload, and maybe there is things within your business or your company, your entrepreneurial venture, that you could outsource that, because the idea here is being repeated about not doing all the work yourself. So you ask yourself what it is that you could be doing, that you're passionate about doing, and then the things that may be in your business that you're not so passionate about, how can you outsource them? How can you give those to other people? And again, going with the people who would love to do that, giving the work to the people where that's their greatest strength, that's what they're passionate about, that kind of thing, because you want the people who enjoy that responsibility, that duty, to be doing it. So I'm seeing that kind of energy. So whether you are working for yourself or you are moving into a sphere where you are working in a company and you're just moving up the ladder, the message is being repeated here about the idea of taking on too much and doing too much, because you don't want to burn yourself out. The other thing here, if we look at the Lover's card as the foundational energy, and then we're talking about a relationship issue, then the King of Wands is all about, in terms of communication with the Lover's card, it's about learning the art of being diplomatic. So this card is about how can you be tactful, how can you be diplomatic in the way that you're communicating to people, because that will go a longer way. I'm seeing in my mind another version of the King of Wands from a different deck, and in that one the image is a man who is a politician like kind of guy, and he's giving a speech at a podium, and he's being celebrated for that because there's lots of confetti and streamers and all about in the picture. So it's about how can you communicate things in a way that gets people to buy in. So it's about, being charismatic, being persuasive, being tactful, being diplomatic, that kind of energy, because I'm seeing that, especially if you are in a position where you are responsible for other people, in terms of being a leader, then the idea of an effective leader is getting people to buy into what it is that needs to be done in terms of the work. So I'm seeing that kind of energy. So that's the King of Wands for the middle of the week. And then moving to the end of the week, we have the Three of Pentacles. So it's very interesting. So we have a lot of cards here on the table that represent work, business, and career. Now, the Three of Pentacles is a career card. So again, that idea of moving up the ladder fits with this card, because if you look at the image, there is the man who is the artisan. He's on a bench. So for me, he's on another platform. So he's, raised a level. He's operating at another level, a higher level. So this card can be career related, and so that would represent like moving up the ladder, so getting a promotion. And going with that, then the Three of Pentacles is a card that talks about, working with what it is that you are very skilled at, because this card is about a craft, a trade, or a skill, but having a reputation or being recognized for that talent, that skill, that ability. So I'm seeing that as a possibility. Another thing with the Three of Pentacles, if it's not like you're moving up the ladder in a company or a corporation, then this is another card for me that represents self-employment. So with the King of Wands being an entrepreneur, and then this card being self-employment, it could be that somebody may be making the choice of whether to leave an existing company to start their own business. Because I'm seeing that, remember, with the idea that the Lovers card represents choices and decisions, it could be somebody's facing the decision of whether to stay in a company or start their own thing. Or how can they maybe make the transition from one to the other? It could be, because now I'm seeing in my head like the idea of having a side hustle. So maybe if the side hustle is working, you know, for somebody else, and you want to transition into your own business full time, then it could be like, how can you do that? The two figures here are holding a blueprint, so it could be like having a blueprint, having a plan, and then things going according to plan, or now's the time to implement that plan. Because another thing with the Three of Pentacles is that it is a gradual progression card. So it could be like you've made the gradual progress, and now it's time to step more into your plan and to, or move on to the next phase or the next stage of your plan. So that's some aspect of that. Now, another aspect of the Three of Pentacles with the relationship slant is that sometimes when the Three of Pentacles shows up and we're talking about a relationship, it could be about repairing some damage. I'm seeing another image for this card in another deck, and in that one, the building that they're working on has been damaged, and so like they're doing construction to repair the damage. So it could be needing to take a look at a relationship, and if there's been some quote unquote damage done to it, it's like the parties involved get together and come up with a plan on how they could work on repairing the damage. Because the idea here with these cards could be, it's like looking at, can we make this relationship work, and then what do we need to do to make it work? And that goes back to the idea here, what I said with the Ten of Wands, about not assuming all the responsibility, like one person in the relationship doing all the work or assuming all the responsibility for it, you know, taking on the burden of it. You can't do that. If the relationship's gonna work, it's because everybody is going to need to be willing to do his or her part to salvage things and to make it work. And then this card would say too, like, that's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to take time to repair the damage, because again, this card is about gradual progression being made. So again, the Three of Pentacles is, it could be a card about career and about stepping up, moving up the ladder, you know. So it could be somebody's looking at a promotion and doing the work that they need to do to kind of get themselves in that position. It could be somebody is faced with the choice or the decision about, you know, transitioning from a company in which they work for to their own thing. So I'm seeing that. Or if it's a relationship issue, how can we salvage the relationship? Because that maybe needing is the most important thing, is deciding on whether the relationship is salvageable or not. And then what are we going to do in terms of creating a plan to work on repairing the damage, and then making sure that everybody who's involved in that situation is doing his or her work. In that regard, the number 3 is a number of commitment. So everybody has to be willing to make the commitment. And that's another aspect of the Lovers card, is commitment. Everybody has to be willing to make the commitment to seeing that through. And that's the only way. Another thing with the 3 is that it's a results card, or a results number, excuse me. And so that's the only way you're going to see progress and results being made, is if everyone is doing his or her part. So now we're going to take a look at what the overall lesson card is, and we'll do that by taking a look at all the numbers on the cards. And now taking a look at the numbers on the cards to determine what the lesson card is for the week. The Ten of Wands is 10, so 10. Kings for me in tarot are valued at 14, so 10 and 14 is 24. And then 3 for the Three Pentacles is 27. So there are 22 major arcana cards in the deck, and so when I get a number over 22, I take the 2 digits, so in this case it'll be 2 and 7, add them together, and the total is 9. So the 9th major arcana card in the deck is the Hermit, and this is the card. So when the Hermit comes up, the Hermit can represent a time of withdrawal, a time of solitude. I call it like the stepping back card. So it could be that in the midst of what's going on here in terms of what we've already discussed, it could be that you're being asked to take a step back. It could be like, taking time to step back so you can make that decision that you need to make or look at your choices. Now, the other thing about the Hermit is that he's standing on a mountaintop. So it could be like the idea of being at the top. So that would fit the whole idea about, moving up, getting a promotion, because he's on the top. So he is at the top of his game. He has reached his peak, so to speak. So it could be like, this is the time you're at the peak, and so it's time for you to kind of move up. The idea here is that I'm seeing the expression that it's lonely at the top. So keep in mind that as you move up the ladder, it kind of maybe removes you more and more from people. I remember that when I worked at my company job before I started my own business, before I made my own transition, which was reflected in the cards, I had the idea that as you move up the ladder, because I was in a managerial position, that as you move up the ladder, every step up removes you one step more from the people who are actually doing the work. I worked in retail. So, every step up you make kind of removes you from the day-to-day operations. It kind of removes you from more and more people. It kind of, puts you in a sphere where you are ultimately, by yourself more and more. So I'm seeing that kind of energy. So it's just a reminder of you maybe not to lose sight of that fact. He's holding a lantern. So the lantern is the idea here about shedding light on a situation, or that it allows you to see the situation from a higher perspective, from a different point of view, that kind of energy. So I'm seeing that. And it could be just saying too, don't lose sight of where you came from. The idea here is if you're shining a light where you came from, you don't lose sight of the fact. It kind of still keeps you connected to people with the idea that the Lovers was all about relationships and how we relate to people. So here it's like, don't get into a position where you become really this aloof, reserved, lofty person, and people around you just kind of say, well, you've lost sight of where you came from. I'm hearing that expression in your head, like, don't forget where you came from. So there's that kind of energy going on with that. The other thing about the Hermit card, when we're talking about relationships, it could be that this whole idea here about repairing a damage that's been done to a relationship or in a relationship could be on some level, creating the choice or the decision, like, should I stay, should I go? I'm hearing that in my head. So with the Hermit card coming up in that context, it can show up when there may be a concern about being alone. So it could be like somebody is maybe considering staying engaged in a relationship, even if the relationship is not working for them, especially if they're the person who's taking on the shoulder or the responsibility of trying to make it work. Then there may be a belief or an idea that they're carrying around about that there's a fear of being by themselves, or that if they leave this relationship, they could potentially be by themselves for a long time before they enter into the next relationship. That kind of energy. So I'm seeing that. So keep that in mind if that is something that's going to keep you in a situation in which the energy of it is no longer working, because that is something that you have to look at. The Hermit card is about self-awareness. So it's about how can you become more self-aware of your choices, of your decisions. What's really going on with those choices and decisions that you're making? Because the Hermit card is saying it's informing you about you. So I'm seeing that as a potential thing here. Now, the Hermit in terms of business could be like somebody who may be considering entrepreneurship, could be needing advice or counsel from a mentor, somebody who has some level of experience, because the Hermit is all about wisdom gained through experience. So it could be that you are being asked to find somebody who has the experience that you could benefit from. And here's the thing about this. The Hermit is a type of person who doesn't necessarily preach. So you need to be looking at somebody's demonstration, because he is a leader, but he leads by example. So as I'm saying that, it reminded me of when I was a manager. So if you're also in a leadership position or a managerial position, or you're supervising or watching over other people, then this card is saying, don't be a person who gives a whole lot of lip service, or preaches to people or talks to people about what they should or should not be doing. Are you a demonstration? Are you setting the example? Because at my company that I worked at, my former company, we had a phrase that you have to set the example. So are you setting the example that you want other people to follow? And if not, how can you change that? Because you'll get more people to follow you and respect you as a leader is if you are setting the example that you want them to follow. This card in that regard is the spiritual principle of your life being your witness. I come from a Christian metaphysical background, and so we call that your demonstration. So what is it that you're demonstrating? Because that is the light. You're shining a light on that. That is your light. And people are seeing that. So either one of two things. Either people are going to be drawn to it or they're going to be repelled by it. But you have to consider, what is the example that I'm setting? What is the demonstration that I'm putting out there for people to see? And then it goes back to the Three of Pentacles on this side, because the two people are actually observing this third person. So it's like, your work is being noticed. You are being observed, whether you are aware of it or not. So here's like, if that's the case, if people are always observing you, what is the energy that you're putting out? Because that's what's getting attention. That's what's getting the notice. The other thing, and this is a totally spiritual thing that I'm seeing in the moment, and that's in light of the fact that the Lover's card had Archangel Raphael on it, then the Hermit and the Three of Pentacles are cards along with the Lover's card. So I'm going to put the Lover's card here because they're sending a different message as a unit. These three cards are saying that if you are in a space where you are faced with a crossroads and you need to make a choice or decision, and you have a connection or relationship to your angels and your spirit guides, then you're being asked to work with them. That's what the Three of Pentacles is for me. It's about working with or following the guidance of your angels and spirit guides. And especially because they're going to be giving you a heads up. They're going to be sending you some kind of signal or a sign by the blueprint. And then the question becomes, are you paying attention to the sign, or are you paying attention to the message? Are you paying attention to the guidance or instruction when it shows up? That kind of energy. So that is a totally separate thing that just popped into my head at this moment. So I'm seeing that. So be mindful of, if you are working with angelic energy and the energies of your spirit guides or ascended masters even, then you're being asked to notice the connection and how they're communicating to you this week. So I'm seeing that. So I'm looking at the Hermit card and asking myself, or checking in to see if I said everything about it. So I'm going to just sum up, because I may get another idea that way. So again, this is about taking a step back. If you're faced with a choice or decision, it could be like you are being asked to follow your own counsel or your own guidance or your own inner wisdom, or you seek out the advice or counsel of somebody who has maybe gone through the experience that you are now faced with. And even with that, the Hermit is still saying it's good to check in with other people. It's good to take advice under consideration, but ultimately you have to decide for yourself what is the best course of action. If you're moving into a sphere where you are about to embark on doing your own thing, because the Hermit is solitude, so it could be like you are a solopreneur, then it's about maybe working with a mentor or somebody who can offer you guidance about what it is that would best help you reach the peak or the pinnacle of your business. If you are serving in a manager or supervisory position, then this card again is asking you to be a demonstration, to lead by example, that kind of energy. And then the last thing is, if it's about a relationship issue, then this card is saying to take a real good look, shine a light on the choices and decisions that you're making in relationships, especially if you have an underlying fear of being alone. because that could be driving you to be in a relationship that may not be working in your best interest, especially as if you are the one shouldering the load. So I'm seeing that. And then the last thing I'm seeing here, since I said shouldering the load, I'm glad I came back. The Hermit card can sometimes be mindful of, like, if you are taking on too much or doing too much, then this card would be like the idea of burning the midnight oil. So that goes back to the 10 of Wands about maybe doing too much, taking on too much energy, too much responsibility, too much duty. And it could be like, you know, you're putting in a lot of hours on the job, or you're working late at night, or that kind of energy. So I'm seeing that. And another thing, things just keep jumping in. So the last thing, and I'm going to end on this note, is that the Hermit can be a card that's asking you to embark on the serious study of a topic of interest. And in that regard, then the Three of Pentacles is a return to university or college. Usually can represent like getting a certificate or getting a diploma in some course of study. So I'm seeing that. So again, that's just another side note. So I'm going to end things there. This has been your tarot card reading for the week. I am James Himm Mitchell. I'm signing off, and as I sign off, I want to thank you for sharing this space with me and joining me for this week's reading. And I look forward to sharing this space here with you again in our next Oracle Outlook. And until then, I'm wishing you a wonderful day. I'm hoping you have a tarot-tastic week. And until the next time, take care.